When thinking about advice that can and can't be trusted, the first major thing we have to consider is the intention of the advice giver. Whenever we receive advice, the goal should be for us to benefit as a result of taking in what was said. But a major truth we have to grasp is that while some people give us advice for our benefit, there are others who give us advice for their benefit. A great example of this comes in the book of Esther. It's here where we meet Haman, who is second in command in the nation, only behind King Ahasuerus. And Haman starts feeling himself. He decides everyone should bow to him as he passes through. Most people do, but not Mordecai, Esther's cousin and a devout Jew. Haman is really salty about this. So he decides that he wants Mordecai dead. But not only Mordecai, he wants all the Jews dead. He wants to be done with it. So Haman goes to King Ahasuerus with this. But what's interesting is how he does it. Haman goes to King Ahasuerus and says, "There's a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people. Neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore, it is not for the king's profit to suffer them." Haman tries to get the king to kill all the Jews. He doesn't just say, "Hey, I'm salty about Mordecai, and I'm on a power trip, and I want the Jews dead." No. Haman pushes the idea that the Jews don't respect King Ahasuerus, that the Jews interfere with his reign, and that it's in the best interest of King Ahasuerus to kill the Jews. Haman acts like he's doing King Ahasuerus a solid by making the suggestion. Haman wasn't looking out for the king. Haman was looking out for Haman. But when he gave advice, Haman tries to frame it like he's helping King Ahasuerus. We have some Hamans out there who will try to guide us, steer us, and coerce us into a certain course of action, not because it's what's best for us, but it's because it's what's best for them. Some people want us to make moves so it can work in their favor, for their enjoyment or for their comfort. And if we're not careful, we'll be done in by advice given with impure intentions. Everybody doesn't care as much as they seem to. Everybody doesn't want us to win the way that they pretend to. And some people are opportunists and not allies. When it comes to getting the right advice, a major thing we have to get right is deciding who we're going to get advice from. We find ourselves in these crossroads and we need God to send us a voice to guide us in the right direction. But we have to be careful what voice we choose. And as we think about the advice that we seek out, a key question to ask ourselves is how successful is the person as it pertains to the subject in question. A great example of this is seen in 2 Samuel during the life of Absalom. To make a long and really fascinating story short, Absalom was a son of David. And Absalom's really mad at David because David did nothing to take action after Absalom's sister Tamar was abused. This caused Absalom to try to steal the throne and overthrow David as king. So basically, Absalom's plan is first to suck up the citizens of Israel. He tries to get everyone on his side and get a collection of them to finesse David out of the throne. And then a key part of the plan is carried out when Absalom and his men start announcing that Absalom is the new king. Now back then, there's no social media, so there's no quick way to disprove this. People might have thought that David was dead. They might have thought that David retired. And this plan works so well that David is literally ready to throw in the towel and just take the L. And this is where things get interesting. Absalom starts to assume the role of king. And his first big question is, what do I do now? Absalom wants to know what he can do to put the nail in David's coffin and push him out of the picture for good. So there are two people there to give Absalom advice. The first is a man named Hushai, who is actually still Team David, but who was operating as like a low-key double agent to help David get the kingdom back. And Hushai tells Absalom, gather the entire kingdom before trying to attack David. And even though this could take weeks, this is his suggestion, obviously so we can buy David more time. Hushai is giving this bad advice on purpose in order to help finesse and make Absalom lose. However, there's another person who gives Absalom advice. This person's name is Ahithophel, who's actually been David's advisor for years. Ahithophel was David's right-hand man. He'd helped him win countless battles and build the kingdom for years. But Ahithophel had recently betrayed David and was now Team Absalom. Ahithophel was such a good battle strategist and gave such good advice that the Bible takes the time to highlight it. Ahithophel's win percentage was out of this world. He was a 5-star advice giver. He was an award-winning battle strategist. He had great Yelp reviews. When it came to advice giving, Ahithophel was that guy. He knew what he was talking about. And the advice that Ahithophel gives Absalom is to go attack David right now while he's lacking. Finish David off at his weakest point and become the new king permanently. Now, what does Absalom do? Does he listen to the proven advice giver and get on David like white on rice? Nah. Absalom decides to follow Hushai's fake advice, and this causes him to ultimately lose his battle to David. Absalom was trying to win a battle against David, and he had an expert battle strategist with the proven history, but he doesn't use his advice. The reason that we sometimes fail to win the battles in front of us is because we have Ahithophels in our contacts, in our churches, and in our families who have been around the block, who have jumped the hurdles that we're about to come up on, but we're busy listening to the Hushais in our life. The problem for some of us is that we take advice from people without ever doing a fruit inspection. We are letting people tell us how to make major moves in our life, but we never ask ourselves what their chessboard looks like in those same areas. We have to understand that we have folks out here that have expert energy, but amateur resumes. Divorced several times, but got all the marriage advice. Never played a sport in their life, but want to talk all the X's and O's. Unemployed for months, but want to tell us how to climb the corporate ladder. All available advice isn't effective advice. We have to seek out our Ahithophels. Who's been there before? Who knows what it will take? Who is currently living our goal? Because that is the voice we may need in order to get to the next level. When we get advice, we need someone that has the right experience, but we also need someone with the right attitude. This is seen in the life of David, but at a different point in his life. See, before David was the king, before he got to rule the kingdom or start a family, David was literally homeless and on the run from crazy King Saul. And this struggle goes on for years. David's life is really rough. This dude is homeless, just trying to scrape by with his men. And at one point, David encounters this guy, Nabal, whose property he had been on and kind of looking out for. David and his men reach out to Nabal and basically tell him that they've been doing him a solid and they would appreciate any kind of help. Cash app, some groceries, anything just to make their lives a little bit easier. Nabal is a huge jerk about this and basically tells David to go kick rocks. And David, seeing that his life completely sucks and this guy is dogging him out for no reason, is ready to go throw hands and put Nabal in the dirt. David wants to kill Nabal. He is that angry. At this moment, David probably needs some advice. However, if David gets advice from the wrong person, they just throw gas on his fire. They tell David to keep the same energy. They tell David not to let Nabal try him. They would tell David not to take no mess from nobody and to set Nabal straight. However, David is actually stopped by Nabal's wife, Abigail. And Abigail takes the time to tell David that even though her husband is a jerk, David shouldn't kill him because she knows that David is anointed to be the king. David is God's main man and will one day rule Israel. And it won't be a good look if he's got this murder on his permanent record when he becomes king. And this changes David's mindset and prevents him from making a huge mistake. Abigail gives David really good advice that helps him in a key moment. However, we have to make sure we realize why Abigail's advice was so helpful. Abigail did such a good job advising David because she kept his focus on the big picture. She didn't let him get caught up in how he was feeling in the moment or what he wanted to do when his emotions were running high. Abigail gives David this hard reset and helps him see that there's more to his life than what he's feeling in that specific moment. Good advice givers are always big picture oriented. They always say the things that will help us be ready for where God is taking us in the long term. Usually in the moments when we need advice, our emotions are uneven. We might be really anxious about a challenge. We might be really heated because someone did us dirty. We might be in our feelings because of a breakup. We might even be happy about something, but not thinking straight. The right advice will always reset our focus and keep our emotions from blocking our elevation. We need counsel from people who can keep us grounded, keep us on point, and not let the Nabal nonsense in our life knock us off and distract us from the throne that God is preparing us for. Another example of someone in the Bible who gave really good advice was Peter. Now, Peter became the leader of the church after Jesus ascended back into heaven. And Peter was dropping bars on the regular. However, my favorite instance of Peter giving advice is in Acts chapter 8. In the story, the disciples are ministering and healing, doing what they do. A man named Simon the sorcerer sees them and is drawn to their work. Simon wants to join the squad, and he offers to pay money in order to receive the same power from God that the disciples had. Of course, that's not how anything works, and Peter sets him straight. Peter tells Simon that he's being wicked, that he needs to repent, and that his money will perish with him. Peter sounds off. And when I first read the story, I almost felt like Peter was being too harsh. However, what we have to remember is that Peter's having this interaction shortly after the events in the Gospels, particularly when Judas sold Jesus out for money. Peter saw what a love of money could do to a person, what trying to mix ministry and money could cause. And he was trying to get Simon off that wave. Peter had strong, reliable advice because he was honest. Peter was willing to say the hard thing that Simon needed to hear, even if it wasn't easy to hear. A major sign that the advice givers in our life aren't being led by God is that we never have hard conversations with them. There are never any hard truths dropped that cause us to reflect. One of the biggest reasons we sometimes hit walls in life is because all the advice that we get validates our excuses, leans us towards our flesh, and keeps us thinking that everyone else is in the wrong. Some of us have remained stuck because our friends are accomplices to our sin. There's no correction. There's no real talk. There's no nudge to be a better version of ourselves. We need the advice giver who will check us on our bad habits, that will tell us when we're being lazy, that will let us know when we need to apologize, that will get on us when we're being trifling. Who is our Peter that's in our corner that will keep it real before things go wrong? Lastly, when seeking out advice, the absolute best thing we can do is get advice from someone that I call the anti-advice giver. What I mean by this is we want someone who doesn't simply give advice based on good intentions, life experience, or their own opinion, even though that's all well and good. The best kind of advice comes from people who seek to share insight with us that they got from God. One person in the Bible who did this was a man named Micaiah. Micaiah is someone that we come across in the book of Kings. Here, King Ahab is planning to go to war, but he only consults a bunch of prophets that were kind of phonies and told him what he wanted to hear. And these prophets all tell him that going to war is a great idea and that things are going to go well. However, Jehoshaphat knows that this is cap. He knows going to war is a bad idea. So he asks Ahab if they could bring in one more prophet. Ahab mentions that they could ask this guy he knows named Micaiah, but he hates Micaiah because Micaiah never says anything positive about him. And the reason for this is because Ahab was a bad king. Micaiah was the only prophet in the community who was spitting facts, who was keeping it real. And this time, before Micaiah shares, an officer pulls up on him and is like, look, bro, all the other prophets already gave Ahab a good report. Just chill out, be nice, let's call it a day. But Micaiah refuses and says he's going to speak whatever the Lord gives him to say. Micaiah was a good advice giver because he was intentional about making sure that his source for giving advice was God. The advice that we get from people will have substance when it comes from the right source. Whenever we receive advice from anyone, the number one thing we need to be asking ourselves is, did God give them this advice? If this is a person who's in their word consistently, the advice might just be from God. If this is a person that's praying for us week to week, the advice might just be from God. If this is a person that we know serves and glorifies God in their own lives, their advice might just be from God. In this season, choose the advice giver with the right intentions. Choose the advice giver who has the right experience. Choose the advice giver who has the right attitude. Choose the advice giver that will be honest. And choose the anti-advice giver who will go to the Lord before they speak truth into our lives. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
I give you my all. I'm giving you all